Path of Exile 2 may have broken through the ARPG glass ceiling. Its early access launch was one of the largest gaming launches of all time, with millions of viewers tuning in on Twitch, hundreds of thousands of players logging into the game on Steam, and numerous more playing on PS5, Xbox, and PoE2's standalone client. Player numbers on Steam remain steady, even in the middle of the week, and I keep seeing more and more new players getting hooked on it. And this is a paid early access version of the game with a fraction of the content it'll end up boasting at its huge 1.0 launch in about a year. While the gameplay is certainly divisive thus far, Grinding Gear Games is getting exactly what they wanted from this early access release of Path of Exile 2: feedback. And a good deal of it is fair, with some silly examples we need to discuss upcoming in this video. We all see YouTube videos detailing what people like, dislike, and think is mediocre blazing across the community. We read threads popping up on Reddit and X with numerous suggestions and praises for systems in the game. This is what Grinding Gear Games wants. It's now their job to take in this info, synthesize it, and discover the best of all worlds and minds. Gamers are great at pointing out issues. Developers are great at finding out solutions. Or they should be. For example, how can they please a player like myself who liked the masochistic punishment of getting trapped by monsters and being unable to escape inescapable doom, while also pleasing players who would like a way to break out of these monster packs without killing the monsters or downright dying? Well, their urgent gameplay changes showcase their genius perfectly well. Literally 5 days into Path of Exile 2's early access, they're making sweeping, intelligent updates. This is the charm of Grinding Gear Games. No matter how the feedback comes in, they seem to pivot and react to it quickly, all while not bowing to any one party in the matter and finding a way to satisfy them all, for the most part. It's something I massively respect about Grinding Gear Games as a company. However, with Path of Exile 2's rise to stardom and tremendous reception, it's also been hounded, kinda, by massive media outlets. On one hand, this is great. It's exposing Path of Exile 2 to new players who might have otherwise not found out about it, giving them the chance to throw their hats into the ARPG ring. On the other hand, the reviews I've read, 2 in particular, are actually... Wait a second. The titles are lying? The reviews are actually good. Don't let them fool you. A lot of people enjoy Path of Exile 2, even media outlets. In this video, we're overviewing 3 reviews: the IGN PoE2 review and 2 legendary PCGamer PoE2 reviews. Spoiler, people like it even with its problems, and they cannot help themselves, they have to compare it to Diablo 4. But before we delve in, make sure you hit the like button if you like this kind of content, and to subscribe to the channel for everything Path of Exile 2. Both are entirely free and the best ways to support the channel. Thank you. Traditional games media paying better attention to Path of Exile 2 is a net positive. However, the way they're going about it is a bit funny. Let's start with IGN. Lots of people are laughing at the fact they gave Path of Exile 2 an 8 out of 10, seeing either the headline or the thumbnail of some of the reactions about the game. I was also in this camp when I first saw the rating, but then I revisited the review earlier today and gave it a read in full. It makes sense. They actually praise the game heavily and critique a few pieces many people also had issues with, namely the amount of loot dropping in early game. That's really about it in terms of actual critiques about the current game. The primary thing seeming to bring the game down in points isn't even really the loot, the combat, the skills, the passive tree complexities, or the endgame. It's the fact it's an early access title with lots of missing content, lots of coming soon. Half the classes, 1/3 of the Ascendancy classes, half the axe, and many weapons and skills missing that will be in the game in its full release. If they're factoring that into the rating, I understand the 8 out of 10 more. It better be a rare 10 out of 10 at launch from IGN though. This was their conclusion on Path of Exile 2. At its early access launch, Path of Exile 2 is already shaping up to be the sequel we've been waiting for. Everything from the refined fundamental action RPG gameplay to the surprisingly fleshed out endgame has seen major improvements, and the half of the story we've got so far shows plenty of promise, even if the setting feels a little generic in the realm of dark fantasy worlds. The downside of playing in early access, though, is that you'll have to slog through all 3 acts twice to reach the endgame, the loot game needs some major tweaking to more consistently reward us with usable items, and some mild to severe technical wonkiness might take the wind out of your sails if things go awry. but it's nothing that makes me concerned for the future of this expansive sequel. Even while we wait for 1.0, Path of Exile 2 is already a stellar way to lose dozens of hours and clear leap forward for the series. It's fair, even to someone who is engaging with every system steadily and having a blast en route to endgame, with only a few qualms being added to my list of issues with the game, like respecing passive points, being too punishing, or being unable to mess around with gems because I'm not getting any support gem drops. Oh no. Of course, in early access, the game will have issues, but the soul of the game is excellent, and I am enjoying it mightily. And after all, with all the issues, Grinding Gear Games is on them. They've already released another big patch for Path of Exile 2 6 days into release. As a final note on the IGN review, some people are also equating the 8 out of 10 review of PoE2 Early Access to their 9 out of 10 review of Diablo 4's launch and calling it laughable. In that, I do agree, especially since they claim D4 had a near perfect endgame, which couldn't be further from the truth. Leaving D4 out of this and reading the full PoE2 review in isolation though, I understand their review, even if I disagree with some of the characterizations within. I'm glad they put it through a thorough review, and I'm glad I read the whole thing. I hope it brings a bunch of new players to Path of Exile 2 Early Access and Path of Exile 2 in the future. If we head to PCGamer, we get a bit of the same. Bombastic headlines hiding generally positive reviews of Path of Exile 2. Bombastic headlines are fine, I use them constantly, but framing a game you're actually praising in a dreary light is definitely a strategic choice on their part. PCGamer ramps this up with Diablo 4 versus Path of Exile 2 comparisons with these two recent review articles they released on their site, with both headlines boldly declaring these two ARPGs must indeed at least be similar and in the same genre, much to the chagrin of a certain someone. Today, we're looking at both articles. Now, even though the headlines pit D4 and PoE2 against each other, framing Diablo 4 as the outright winner, the articles both heavily praise Path of Exile 2 in many regards, which was a shock to me after clicking in from the posts advertising them. This article right here was sent to me from my boss, who was a big Diablo 4 and Last Epoch player, with an obvious preference for Last Epoch. He never played Path of Exile 1, but was convinced to pop into Path of Exile 2 for the early access launch weekend and beyond. That weekend, and his entire week this week, according to him, are going to disappear and have disappeared quite quickly, and he doesn't know if he can go back to Diablo 4, although he definitely will go back to Last Epoch. The writers of these articles, though, use Diablo 4 as a framing device for readers obviously interested in Path of Exile 2. Sure, the headlines will generate plenty of buzz and memes from people trying to dunk on Diablo 4 in IGN or PCGamer, but peering into the actual writings are quite interesting. The first article is definitely more negative and focuses on comparing Path of Exile 2's and Diablo 4's loot systems, while the second observes the cosmetic differences between games. Both do a deeper dive into Path of Exile 2 at times, but will focus on the meat of both. For example, this is the opening of the first article focused on loot. I'm around 20 hours into Path of Exile 2 and all my gear sucks. I'm wearing clothes even a zombie would refuse to wear with bonuses I'm not even sure I can tell are doing anything. There are so many different stats in this game, and most of them don't seem to be that important when you're still below level 30. I'm not exactly suffering when it comes to clearing dungeons, and PoE2 might be one of the best action RPGs I've played, but the loot situation is kind of a drag this far in. On the loot situation, this writer obviously had a point in the eyes of both the PoE2 community and Grinding Gear Games. He called out the lack of early game drops, supposing endgame might fix that. From what I've gathered, it lacked on both fronts, and Grinding Gear Games has already addressed that 6 days into early access. He also sounds like he had quite the unlucky streak if he was 20 hours in with no good gear. That really sucks for him, and that would definitely damper the experience. It's again why I think Grinding Gear Games should introduce a crafting and shop quest to the game, ensuring players understand all the ways to upgrade their gear. It's not just monster drops in Path of Exile 2. This quest could also explain what affixes are, what prefixes and suffixes do, and what might be important to the game with subtle hits from the NPCs. Maybe these hints would help players like this that generally do not seem to understand what is powerful in gear and what is not powerful. However, where the writer truly loses me and probably many others is when he begins praising Diablo 4's loot design, especially smart loot, and how that opens up build possibilities for him in the early game, while Path of Exile 2 feels limiting. I truly beg to differ. It's a fundamental difference that should never change. It's vital any drop could be the next big drop, either for your current character, a future character, a friend, or someone willing to buy the item from you. Additionally, the dude points out in the article, PoE2 is limitless. You can use whatever weapon you'd like on any class, so the only limitations are the ones you put on the game yourself, either through not wanting to use certain items due to preference, or due to them not being powerful enough. So, very good credit to him. I'd take scarcer loot for your exact build over smart loot any day though. How about you? The second writer and article dives into cosmetics in PoE2, once again using D4 as a framing device. This is quite the bait Twitter post, is it not? And yet, I agree with the article almost completely. They talk about how they enjoy Path of Exile 2 more than Diablo 4 and critique something I wish grinding gear games would steal outright from Blizzard and Diablo 4, but I know it will likely never happen. The transmog system from D4. If you find a piece of gear in a league in PoE2, wouldn't it be so cool to be able to just use it as a skin on all characters in that league? Even if it was in-game, even if it was an MTX, either way, it would be incredible. The current skin transfer MTX in the PoE store is not good. I will never buy it. It needs a revamp. If it permanently unlocked a skin I found, I would 100% buy that, even if I had to refine the skin in a league. But the one-time use that's temporary is not for me. This quote from the article is excellent, and even though the base skins in Path of Exile 2 look amazing, I'm sad I cannot cobble them together. When I see my Necromancer in the character selection screen, I do have to give myself a little pat on the back for making them look both fetching and terribly menacing. And I've got to give Blizzard credit for making it very easy to create a whole bunch of fancy outfits without ever needing to delve into the microtransaction shop, though the temptation is always there given the exceptional quality of some of its offerings. Well said, my man. Well said. So there you have it. The traditional games media on the surface might look like they're not the biggest Path of Exile 2 superfans, but actually diving into the articles and reading them through point by point proves out something entirely different. I'm glad I gave them both a shot. But IGN better give PoE2 1.0 a 10 out of 10 if it's any good. Thanks so much for watching the video. Make sure to hit the like button if you ended up liking it and subscribing to the channel for all things Path of Exile 2. I will see you in the next one. Stay sane, my fellow exile. Hala Kura.